When did you discover your perfect partner was an elaborate lie? I literally just found out the man I was planning a wedding with, who I've been splitting the $1,247 rent on our apartment 3B for 2 years and 8 months, doesn't actually exist in the way I thought, and I am currently sitting in the break room of Marshall & Finch, the super stuffy law firm where I am perpetually underpaid, trying to figure out if I need to call the police or an exorcist. I don't even know where to start with this dumpster fire TBH. Hi, I'm Noah Reed 37M, and I am currently drowning in credit card debt, thanks primarily to the aforementioned almost fiancé who had a very expensive habit of forgetting his wallet when the bill arrived. NGL, I am so financially stressed right now that seeing a $43.67 Trader Joe's grocery bill hit my account gives me physical chest pains. I've used up exactly 142 hours of PTO this year just to deal with his emergencies. The setting for this betrayal naturally is this soul-crushing law firm. Think heavy mahogany, terrible fluorescent lighting, and the constant smell of burnt microwave popcorn. My life revolves around corporate mergers and trying not to let my iPhone 14 battery die before 5:30 p.m. Okay, let me backtrack. The source of my current throat-closing anxiety is Julian. Julian Hayes, he was perfect, you know. A consultant always traveling, which explained why his cell signal was always patchy and why he only came over to my place, never his, which was supposedly leased corporate housing in a fancy high-rise downtown. I know, red flag 1 million, but past me was blinded by the fact he knew how to properly assemble IKEA furniture. Julian and I had been dating since late 2019 minus the pandemic gap, which brings us to 2 years 8 months of official togetherness. We were looking at venues. My mom, who lives in Westfield, was already calling caterers. I was happy, stupid but happy. The main issue besides the vague job and the constantly drained bank account was the money situation. My credit card debt is a monster. I had to pay a $347 bill last month for a joint trip we took because his corporate account was on hold. Then there was the $85 plumber charge for the overflowing toilet he somehow caused. And recently I noticed several small, weird $200 withdrawals from our joint savings, which I funded 90% of. Surprise. When I brought it up last Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. during our quick coffee break at the Starbucks down the street, he got instantly defensive. Noah, seriously, we are talking about our future and you are scrutinizing $200, he said, stirring his venti latte like he was the CEO of capitalism. It's $203 times this month, Julian. That's $600. I need to pay down my Visa bill, which is currently sitting at an $8,900 balance, remember. I need that money for the security deposit on the new 12-month lease, I told him. I felt my hands shaking slightly. I hate talking about money because I always feel like I'm the nag, but I couldn't afford to be nice anymore. He gave me that condescending, patented Julian look, the one that made me feel like I was just being dramatic. I needed to cover some incidental expenses. It's coming back into the account on Friday, trust me, he said, and like an absolute clown, I trusted him. I needed someone to vent to, someone who wasn't Julian. That's where the toxic energy of the law firm comes in. My primary source of stress relief and simultaneous doom is Roy Watson 39M, the firm's resident office gossip. Roy is technically a paralegal, but his true calling is knowing who is sleeping with who and whose 2018 Honda Civic just got towed. I caught Roy by the copier this morning, the one that always jams naturally, and I was stressed because Julian had triple texted me at 7 am saying he couldn't make dinner tonight because of a last-minute flight delay. I swear, Roy, if he misses my work celebration dinner, I'm going to scream. He's always traveling, I muttered, wiping down my desk. Roy paused mid-copy, his eyes instantly lighting up. He leans in conspiratorially, adjusting his AirPods. NGL, Noah, I've always thought your boyfriend was a little vague. Vague how? I asked, suddenly defensive. Well, he's allegedly a high-level consultant, right? But I've been on LinkedIn a lot lately. I'm trying to find a new job, BTW, and he doesn't seem to have any traceable employment history at the firms he mentioned. I've seen more confirmed details about mythical creatures than about Julian Hayes. I felt my stomach drop hard. I told Roy he was overreacting, that Julian kept his profile locked down for security reasons. God, I was such an idiot. The other critical component in my professional misery is Janice Wilson, 46F. Janice is the definition of a two-faced friend. She acts like my confidant, always giving me advice about Julian, but I know for a fact she's feeding Roy all the details about my life behind my back. She's always wearing these aggressively bright business suits and smells faintly of expensive, slightly dated perfume. Later that day, I was sitting with Janice during lunch, eating my sad pre-prep chicken salad. You really need to stand up to him about the money, Noah, Janice said, taking a massive bite of her Chipotle bowl. I mean, $8,900 on one card, that's terrible interest. And I saw those Cash App transactions he sent you there always for exactly $18.50, never covering half the dinner bill. I know, I sighed, but he's under a lot of pressure with work. He keeps saying once this big merger closes, he's getting a huge bonus and we can finally clear my debt. He promised we'd put $5,000 toward it next month. Janice gave me the fake sympathy face. Oh honey, that's what they all say, you need to verify things, like what company does he even work for again? I rattled off the name of a firm based in Delaware that sounded legitimate. Janice looked down at her phone, scrolling through Instagram stories. Because Roy mentioned he saw Julian's supposed business card on your desk when you were out sick, and Roy said the logo looked suspiciously like clip art from 2005. Roy has an eye for detail, you know. The way she brought up Roy and the card, making it sound like an innocent observation, felt slimy. I knew she was planting seeds of doubt that Roy had given her specifically to pass along. But still, the clip art comment stuck. I felt a surge of cold dread mixed with white-hot embarrassment. I started doing what any sensible, debt-ridden, catastrophizing person does. I snooped. That night, Julian called me from what sounded like an airport lounge, saying his flight was delayed 4 hours, which meant he missed the dinner. He sounded tired but sweet. He texted, "I'm serious, I am so sorry babe, but seriously call me when you get home. Love you." I texted back, "I'm taking a Talenti gelato break and watching Hulu. See you tomorrow." As soon as he hung up, I felt a terrible certainty wash over me. I needed proof. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who checks his partner's private messages, but after Roy's comments, Janice's passive-aggressive shade, and my almost $9K credit card balance, I had to know. My sanity and my immediate future depended on it. Julian sometimes left his secondary phone, a cheap Samsung Galaxy he claimed was only for work calls, charging in my apartment. I grabbed it. The battery was at 3%, perfect. I quickly opened his recent texts. Mostly just numbers I didn't recognize. I went to his email, empty. I was starting to feel relieved, telling myself I was paranoid and needed therapy. Then I checked the photo gallery. Julian is notoriously terrible about deleting screenshots, and the phone storage was almost full. There was a recent folder labeled tax stuff. Boring, right? Wrong. The first photo was a screenshot of a driver's license, not Julian Hayes. The photo was Julian, but the name on the license was Jeremy Dent. Age 39, and the address listed was definitely not the fancy corporate housing downtown, but an address in a semi-sketchy suburb I had driven through once. My heart didn't just drop, it completely stopped. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap Samsung Galaxy phone almost slipping out of my sweaty hands. I was literally shaking. I wanted to throw up, but I hadn't eaten enough at lunch to actually accomplish it. I clicked through the folder, my vision blurry. The next image was a screenshot of a Zelle transaction receipt. The recipient, Janice W., and the memo, rental deposit split. Wait, what? Janice Wilson, my two-faced friend Janice 46F, who works on the 5th floor right down the hall from me. I was in denial. Maybe it was a different Janice W., maybe it was a random Zelle he sent by mistake. But the amount was precise, $623.50. Half of my $1,247 rent. The math was not mathing, you guys. I kept scrolling, my breath catching in my throat. There were photos of what looked like the interior of a different, much shabbier apartment. Then there was a selfie of Julian/Jeremy looking smug, standing in front of a beat-up Toyota Corolla. He always told me he drove a least expensive BMW, he couldn't afford, another lie. And then I saw the texts. Actual real texts between Jeremy and Janice W. from just last week. Janice W., did you make sure to transfer that back to Noah's account? He's being dramatic about his credit card debt again. $8,900, LOL. Jeremy, yeah, I put in 200, he won't notice. I need to make sure my credit isn't hit when we finally finalize the lease. Can you pick me up Tuesday at 5:30 p.m.? The flight excuse is getting weak. Janice W., sure. Wear the blue shirt, and did you tell him you're moving out in 60 days yet? We need this apartment. Jeremy, not yet, I'm serious, I need the deposit first. After all I've done for you, you better not screw me on the security deposit. I felt a roar of blood in my ears. The world outside the break room, wait no, I was still sitting on my bed at home. This was last night. The world outside the confines of that terrible phone screen disappeared. They knew each other. They were working together. And the biggest, most gut-wrenching realization, Janice wasn't just my two-faced friend, she was Julian's accomplice. I realized Julian's constant travel wasn't travel at all. He was hiding out somewhere nearby, maybe even in that terrible suburban apartment, and Janice was the one who was running interference, feeding me those seemingly innocent gossip tidbits from Roy, making sure I looked away at the critical moments. I checked the timestamps. Their texts were happening while Julian was supposedly on his last-minute flight delay. He wasn't even traveling. He was just across town, coordinating with Janice to eventually steal my apartment and my security deposit. I was numb, yet raging. I was sitting there realizing that two people I saw every single day at the office had constructed this elaborate, 2.5-year-long catfish situation, designed specifically to use my apartment and drain my meager savings, all while pretending to be my friends and fiancé. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and started frantically emptying the shared junk drawer, looking for the physical business card Roy had seen. I found it. It had the clip art logo. I ripped it up. Then I realized I was still at home. Julian/Jeremy would be flying back soon, and I couldn't face him yet. I needed to process. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove. I ended up back in the Target parking lot, parking spot A17. If anyone cares about hyperreal details, at 2 a.m., exactly where I started processing this madness. I was crying, the ugly kind of crying where snot is everywhere and your eyes swell shut, while simultaneously dialing Roy. Roy answered on the second ring, sounding groggy. "Noah, dude, it's 2 a.m. Are you okay?" "Roy, you were right. You were so right," I whispered, barely able to speak. "He's not Julian, he's Jeremy, and he and Janice, they're roommates. They're working together. They're trying to take my apartment." There was a long silence on the line. Then Roy, the perpetually gossiping paralegal, let out a slow, astonished exhale. "Wait, you're serious? Janice Wilson, that bitch." I explained everything, the dual identities, the texts, the Zelle receipt for the rent split, the whole terrifying plot. Roy went from groggy gossip to furious advocate in about 30 seconds. "Noah, get home, wipe that phone clean, don't confront him. We need to play this smart. If they think you're still oblivious, we have time," Roy commanded, sounding like he was running a CIA operation. "We have to get your name off that lease and your money back. And more importantly, we have to make them pay." They tried to scam an office worker who is fighting $8,900 in credit card debt. The audacity. I took a deep breath, wiping mascara smudges off my face. I can't go back in there yet, Roy. I need to get through the workday. What do I do when I see Janice tomorrow? She's going to look me dead in the face and ask if I'm okay. You smile, you nod, you act normal. You are going to pretend you know nothing. And here's the plan for tomorrow, Roy said. We need physical evidence that links Julian/Jeremy and Janice directly to a fraudulent scheme related to the law firm, or at least the office building. That's the only way to ruin them professionally and financially. I was supposed to go into the office that next morning, but I took a sick day. I couldn't pretend. I couldn't sit 50 feet away from Janice and pretend she hadn't been systematically destroying my life for months. I spent the day trying to untangle my finances, calling my credit card company, trying to figure out how I could possibly afford $1,247 rent on my own. It felt hopeless. I was exhausted, wired, and starving. By the time I was ready to drag myself back to work 2 days later, Thursday, I had slept for maybe 4 hours total, fueled by gas station coffee and pure, undiluted rage. I walked into Marshall and Finch on Thursday morning, ready to execute Roy's extremely intricate plan, which involved exploiting Roy's knowledge of office security procedures and maybe, just maybe, accessing Janice's computer files. I avoided Janice until noon. I kept my head down, focusing on a particularly tedious merger document, trying to ignore the pit of nausea in my stomach. At 12:30 p.m., Roy and I were huddled in the server room closet, long story, involving a lost badge and some questionable IT security, discussing Phase 1 when my phone started absolutely vibrating off the desk. It wasn't Julian/Jeremy. It was the Ring doorbell app notification. I grabbed my phone, thinking maybe it was the Amazon package I ordered, which was literally just a replacement charger, but still, it was Julian/Jeremy. Standing outside my apartment door, looking agitated. But he wasn't alone. Standing right next to him was Janice Wilson. They were talking in hushed, stressed tones. Janice was holding a large duffel bag. Julian/Jeremy was holding a small box, which looked suspiciously like the box where I kept my grandfather's expensive watch. I couldn't hear the audio clearly because the signal was cutting out, but I could clearly see Janice grab the keys from Julian/Jeremy and attempt to unlock the door to my apartment 3B. I quickly texted Roy the screenshot, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. They are at my apartment right now. JNIC has a bag. Roy looked at the photo, his jaw dropping. He didn't even use a dramatic whisper this time. They're moving his stuff out early, Roy said, his voice rising in panic. They're trying to clear out before you get the full security deposit back. If they take that watch, suddenly the whole building shuddered hard. It wasn't just a vibration, it was a deep earth-moving rumble. In the server closet, the lights flickered violently, then went out completely. The air conditioning unit whined to a stop. I could hear papers rustling and a distant, terrified scream from the hallway. Roy and I froze in the pitch darkness of the server room. What the hell was that? I whispered, heart hammering against my ribs. Roy pulled out his phone flashlight. I don't know, but that felt seismic. It felt big. He checked his phone, no signal. We stumbled out of the server closet, finding the entire 5th floor plunged into emergency lighting. People were gathered by the windows shouting. I rushed over, trying to see what was happening outside the tall glass windows of the law firm. The sky was the wrong color, a sickly greenish yellow, and then I saw it. The massive electrical substation 3 blocks away had just exploded, sending a horrifying plume of black smoke into the air. Power lines were down and traffic was already backed up into a nightmare gridlock. A loud screeching alarm started sounding from the elevator bay, cutting in and out. It's a citywide power outage, Noah, Roy said, wide-eyed. Maybe an earthquake or maybe something hit the grid. This is bad. This is a natural disaster-level blackout. My mind immediately flashed back to my apartment. Julian/Jeremy and Janice were there right now, probably stealing the last of my valuable belongings before cutting and running. And now the entire city was paralyzed, communications were likely down, and I was stuck on the 5th floor of a law firm with my only ride home being the stairs, which were now being swamped by panicked corporate attorneys. Roy, they're still at my apartment, I said, trying to push through the shock and the burgeoning panic attack. They're getting away, we have to go now. We can't just leave, Noah, the building might be structurally compromised, Roy argued, adjusting his glasses. Wait for security, I don't care, they are robbing me and then they are going to disappear into a citywide power outage where no one can trace them. I'm going. I pushed past the crowd towards the emergency exit stairs. Roy grabbed my arm, his face grim. Wait, if the roads are shut down, getting across town will take hours, but if this is a total grid shutdown, guess who just became completely untraceable? Julian and Janice, I whispered, realizing the terrifying implication. Roy nodded slowly. This blackout didn't just complicate things, Noah, it just gave them the ultimate getaway cover. They probably won't be back to the office for days. They think they've won. He tightened his grip on my arm. But you know what else a citywide natural disaster does? It makes security non-existent. Every system is down, every camera is blind, every lock is just metal. He looked me dead in the eyes, his voice low and intense, the office gossip fully transforming into a man with a plan. If they think they can use a natural disaster to escape justice, we're going to use the same chaos to execute the absolute pettiest revenge imaginable, Noah. But we have to get out of this building and across town without a car and without power. Okay? I choked out, feeling a surge of adrenaline overcoming the fear. Where do we start? We're going to the 5th floor IT closet. I know where the firm keeps their hard drives with all the non-cloud backed up client data. Janice Wilson is the lead paralegal on the biggest merger of the year. If we can get physical evidence of their fraud and leverage against the firm's data in one go, suddenly someone screamed from the end of the hall. The elevators are stuck, and the emergency generator just failed. Roy ignored the noise, still focused on me. We need to go, now, before the emergency lights die completely. We have about 3 minutes to execute phase 2 before this law firm becomes a death trap, and before Janice and Jeremy successfully pull off the biggest catfish escape in history. I looked at the window again. The black smoke was thicker now, swirling against the unnaturally dark sky. They had the watch, they had the security deposit money, and they had the perfect chaotic cover. And I had Roy Watson, the office gossip, ready to risk his paralegal career for a taste of righteous, petty revenge. I took one last look at the disaster outside and said, "Let's go steal some hard drives, Roy." And just as we started running toward the IT closet, the emergency lights in the main hall dimmed, flickered, and then went completely, terrifyingly dark. The pitch black swallowed us whole. I could smell dust and ozone and something vaguely metallic, probably Roy's cheap aftershave mixed with panic. It was terrifying, TBH, like actual horror movie dark. Roy and I were standing in the middle of a major corporate law firm, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of client data, and the only light came from the pathetic flashlight on Roy's Samsung phone. "Okay, phase 2 needs an adjustment," Roy hissed, pulling me toward the IT closet door. He was surprisingly strong, which I guess happens when you spend your life hauling boxes of confidential files. Janice's office is down the hall. It closet is here. We can't get the hard drives and her laptop, it's too much time, and we don't know how long the stairs are safe. "They're at my apartment, Roy, right now, taking my stuff," I whispered back, my voice shaking. I kept picturing Janice struggling with my grandpa's watch box. That watch was the only thing I had left from him. Yes, and if they disappear, we have zero leverage. We need the professional ruin, Noah. That's the only way we get the money back. Trust me, Julian/Jeremy cares way more about his future credit score and avoiding jail time for corporate fraud than he does about your $1,247 rent split. And Janice, she lives for her paralegal title. We hit them where it hurts. We got to the IT closet door. Roy expertly slipped a lost access card he stole from a junior associate into the magnetic reader. Nothing happened, obviously. Everything was dead. "Okay, plan B," Roy said, sounding incredibly calm for someone potentially facing a building collapse. He pulled a thick paper clip from his pocket. Thank God Marshall and Finch never invested in serious physical security for this ancient door. He spent about 90 seconds jiggling the clip in the keyhole. I stood there, trying to control my breathing, listening to the muffled screams and footsteps from the stairwell. I could practically hear my credit card debt increasing in the darkness. Click. The door creaked open, revealing a wall of blinking, silent servers. The emergency generator for the servers was still humming weakly, thankfully, providing a sliver of light and a terrifying whirring sound. "The critical hard drives are in the locked cabinet second shelf," Roy instructed, pulling out a heavy, slightly rusty hammer he kept in his desk drawer for aggressive paperweight needs. I did not ask. "Roy, isn't that illegal?" I asked, immediately regretting asking a moral question while actively engaged in B&E. "Noah, your fiancé is trying to rob you during a natural disaster with the assistance of a certified paralegal, using a fake identity that allowed him to drain your bank account. We are now playing by chaos rules. Get the evidence." He used the hammer to smash the cheap lock on the server cabinet. It made a sickening, loud thunk that echoed through the dark floor. I winced, waiting for security, if they were even conscious, to show up. We didn't go for the massive server racks. Roy knew exactly what we needed: the small, removable backup disks that held Janice's specific project files and the overall firm communications archive. He grabbed 2, labeling them quickly with a permanent marker he always carried. "Janice's desktop is the priority now," Roy announced. "She probably has all the bank transfer receipts and those awful texts saved locally, plus details on this merger that could ruin her reputation if they fall into the wrong hands. We need the physical hard drive from her workstation." Getting to Janice's desk was surreal. The whole office was a ghost ship, papers scattered everywhere from the initial tremor. The only sound was our shoes scuffing the expensive carpet and the distant wail of emergency sirens outside. We saw a few people huddled in the lobby area waiting for instructions, but thankfully nobody was near the paralegal bay. We found Janice's desk aggressively organized, naturally. She even had a little succulent plant that looked very smug. Roy flipped the desk on its side. Seriously, the man transformed and started ripping the power cables out of her tower. He had a screwdriver kit because of course he did. She's using a standard desktop tower NGL. "Easy target," Roy muttered, working quickly. "The drive is usually right here. 5 screws, 30 seconds. As he worked, I kept checking my phone, still no signal. The thought that Julian/Jeremy and Janice were still at my apartment, maybe even gone by now, was making me dizzy. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the credit card panic combining with the immediate visceral fear of betrayal. "Hurry, Roy, I think I hear people coming back up the stairs," I urged. "Almost there," he grunted. Crack, he popped the cover off the tower. He yanked the drive out, a small, heavy rectangle. He bagged it quickly. "Okay, phase 3, get the hell out of the firm and get to your apartment," Roy said, zipping the bag closed. "This drive, combined with the texts you already have, is everything we need to ruin them, financially, socially, and professionally." We took the stairs down 5 flights. It felt endless. We passed exhausted, terrified people on every floor, mostly lawyers arguing about liability. We walked straight out the main glass doors. Nobody stopped us. Security was gone, probably dealing with the broken generator or, surviving the citywide blackout. Outside was chaos. Sirens blared constantly. It was still dark and unnerving. Traffic was completely gridlocked. There was a weird smell of smoke and gasoline. The city looked like an apocalypse movie. "We can't drive. We can't call." We have to walk and we have to assume they are still at your place, or at least haven't gotten far, Roy said, pulling a massive water bottle and an energy bar out of his work backpack. Roy Watson prepared for everything, especially the downfall of his coworkers. My apartment 3B, was only about 2 miles away, but 2 miles in a complete panic, carrying a heavy backpack with someone else's stolen hard drive felt like 20. We walked for 45 minutes, dodging stalled cars and people trying to manage cash-only transactions for bottled water. When we finally rounded the corner onto my street, my heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out from the effort. My building looked normal as a building can look without electricity, that is. Be quiet, Roy warned. We're checking the fire escape side first. We crept around the back alley. The fire escape for apartment 3B was exposed. I looked up. The window to my kitchen was slightly ajar. "They're definitely gone," I whispered, relief washing over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of sick dread. Relief because I didn't have to confront them in a blackout, dread because they had been in my apartment. "Wait," Roy pulled me back into the shadows of the dumpster. "Look." He pointed at the alleyway entrance. Julian/Jeremy's beat-up Toyota Corolla. The one he claimed was a leased BMW was parked just around the corner, half on the sidewalk, covered in a tarp. And leaning against the trunk, staring intently at her phone, probably useless without signal, LOL, was Janice Wilson. She was smoking a cigarette, a habit she always claimed to have quit because of her high-performance job demands. She looked stressed, manic, and absolutely guilty. "They're waiting for the power to come back on," Roy deduced quietly. Or maybe they were planning to wait out the initial rush hour gridlock. Either way, they're still here. And they probably have a trunk full of your stuff, including that watch I saw red. All the $18.50 Venmo transactions, the $8,900 debt, the 2 years of lies, the condescending looks, the stolen rent money, the fake fiancé, the clip art business cards. It all boiled up into a single, overwhelming need for justice. Petty, terrible justice. "I'm going in," I announced, grabbing the backpack from Roy. "No, we have the evidence. We call the police when the phones work." "Don't confront them, y'all lose the upper hand," Roy hissed. "I don't care about the upper hand right now, Roy. I care about my grandpa's watch and my dignity." I saw Janice finally look up from her phone, scanning the street nervously. I ducked lower. Roy tugged my arm again. "Okay, look, you can't fight them, but we have Janice's work life in this bag. We have the proof that Julian/Jeremy is a fraud. We have the power to ruin them. The revenge needs to be surgical, not physical." He grabbed the hard drive from the backpack, held it up, and looked me in the eye. "We're not going to confront them. We are going to make this entire catastrophe work for us. We're going to put this hard drive back in Janice's computer," but first he winked, a sudden maniacal grin spreading across his face. "We are going to plant some very interesting documents on it first. Something that will make Marshall and Finch execute Janice Wilson and maybe even give you a raise just for being a victim of corporate espionage." I looked back at Janice, puffing angrily on her cigarette, and then down at the stolen hard drive. The adrenaline was pumping so hard I could feel my fingers tingling. "What kind of documents?" I asked, immediately on board. Roy's plan was brilliantly, criminally petty. Since the entire grid was down, everyone was using backup power, which meant the law firm's ancient, low-security server in the IT closet was still running, just barely. Roy, always the hacker wannabe, had downloaded a basic USB bootkit onto a flash drive he kept for data transfers. The bootkit allowed him to clone and manipulate data on the hard drive without needing the main desktop operational. We found a semi-functional convenience store half a mile down the street that was running on a sputtering generator and had a single public-use desktop. I know, gross, but survival. Roy worked fast, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He cloned the contents of Janice's hard drive just in case. Then he went deep into the firm's archived emails, accessible from the files on the server drives we also grabbed. "I found it," Roy whispered triumphantly. "Janice's performance review from 2021. She got a warning for accessing unauthorized client data. And here's a massive file from the current merger, the confidential closing documents she's handling. They're super sensitive. If these were compromised, what are you doing?" I asked, leaning closer, trying to see the screen in the terrible fluorescent light. "I'm creating a new folder on Janice's work drive named Jeremy Debt Repayment Plan," Roy explained, typing furiously. "And I'm filling it with a few things. First, a fake invoice where Julian Hayes Consulting bills Marshall and Finch for $15,000 in incidentals. Second, I am putting in a screenshot of your joint bank account showing all the suspicious withdrawals, labeled as commission for apartment acquisition. Third, and this is the petty genius part, I am dumping all the extremely confidential merger closing documents into that same folder." I gaped. "You're making it look like she was stealing the firm's data to sell it, and using the proceeds to pay off her consultant boyfriend who was secretly conspiring with her to steal my apartment. Not just stealing it, Noah, compromising it. This merger is worth billions. If this data got out, it would be catastrophic for the firm. They don't care about your $8,900 debt. They care about their billions. This is how we make them care about Janice Wilson." Roy finished pulling the flash drive out. We made the silent trek back to the apartment. Janice was still leaning against the car, now openly looking frustrated and trying to start the engine, which just sputtered uselessly. The whole block was dark and quiet, just the sound of distant sirens. "Okay, plan, I keep watch. You sneak into your apartment, replace her hard drive, and confirm the watch is gone. If they catch you, run," Roy instructed. I nodded, gripping the stolen hard drive like it was a weapon. The back window was still cracked. I slid it open just enough to shimmy through, scraping my knee on the sill I was in. My apartment felt cold and smelled different. Sanitized, maybe? I quickly headed to the bedroom. My dresser drawers were slightly ajar. I rushed to the spot where I kept my grandfather's watch box hidden under a pile of old t-shirts. It was gone. My heart sank. That was it. I had been catastrophized, catfished, robbed, and humiliated. The petty revenge felt less satisfying now that the tangible loss was real. I went to my desk where Julian/Jeremy sometimes worked. I quickly checked his backpack, which was still there, empty except for a worn-out copy of a book about financial planning. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The only thing left to do was confirm they hadn't changed the locks. I checked the front door. The deadbolt was in the locked position, but the key I was carrying still turned the main lock. Thank God, I didn't waste time looking for more evidence. The evidence was in the bag on Janice's hard drive. I needed to get this done. I went back out the window and met Roy in the shadows. "It's gone, Roy." "The watch," I whispered, feeling the sting of tears. Roy put a hand on my shoulder. "Okay, well, focus on the revenge then. We get the money, Noah. And we ruin them. That watch is deductible. Their careers or not, we had to get that hard drive back into Janice's computer at the law firm without being caught. It was a massive risk, especially since we didn't know if the power would flicker back on suddenly. So 2 days later, Friday, the city was still half functional. Parts of downtown had power restored, but the area near Marshall and Finch was still mostly running on generators. The office was technically open, but mostly skeleton crew. Roy and I were among the few who dared to come in, citing mission-critical merger tasks. "NGL, I just needed the free AC." Janice was nowhere to be seen, naturally. She had emailed the managing partner saying she was stuck across town due to the transit chaos. Julian/Jeremy ghosted. His number went straight to voicemail. We waited until 7:30 p.m. when the managing partner, Mr. Marshall, finally left, looking haggard. The entire office was running on the hum of a single generator. The emergency lights were weak and yellow. We slipped into Janice's office. It was exactly as we left it. Roy popped the cover of the desktop tower back off. He swapped the hard drive. It took maybe 15 seconds. He screwed the cover back on, reattached the cables, and flipped the desk back upright. Perfect. It looked like she just hadn't logged out. "Now we wait," Roy said, wiping his hands on his pants. "Tomorrow is Saturday. She won't come in. She probably thinks she's safe until Monday. We need to make sure the firm finds this before she has a chance to log in and delete the folder." This is where the true office gossip prowess came in handy. Roy knew that the junior IT technician, Kevin, 24M, lives for drama and Marvel movies, always came in on Saturday morning to check the network integrity. Roy's plan was to anonymously tip off Kevin about a possible malware breach in the paralegal bay, specifically targeting Janice's machine, which Kevin would be obligated to check first thing. Fast forward to Saturday morning, 9:00 a.m. I was at home, completely drained, living on lukewarm coffee and the vague hope of justice. My apartment felt huge and hollow without Julian/Jeremy's presence, even though that presence was a lie. I was trying to figure out how to pay the full $1,247 rent on Monday, and I had exactly $382.19 in my checking account. Then my phone buzzed. It was Roy. Roy text 9:15 a.m. He did it. Kevin went straight to Janice's machine. He found the folder. Me text 9:16 a.m. OMG. What happened? Roy text 9:16 a.m. Kevin called Mr. Marshall immediately. Marshall is losing his mind. The merger closing documents are in a folder called Jeremy Debt Repayment Plan. They think she's selling firm secrets to pay off a loan shark named Jeremy. Roy text 9:17 a.m. I just overheard Marshall shouting on the emergency phone line to security. Janice Wilson is suspended immediately, effective now. They are dispatching people to her house to retrieve all firm property. They are involving the FBI over the potential data compromise. Roy text 9:18 a.m. Petty level achieved. I burst out laughing, a horrible, choking sound of relief and hysteria. It wasn't about the FBI, it was about the immediate total obliteration of Janice Wilson's precious, perfectly tailored, two-faced life. A week went by where the entire firm was on edge. The blackout had subsided, but the fallout was immense. Janice was gone. She was unreachable. Nobody knew where she or Julian/Jeremy were, and the firm was conducting a massive internal investigation, terrified that the confidential merger documents had been replicated. The managing partners were freaking out. They knew Janice had been involved in something shady, but the Jeremy Debt Repayment Plan folder made it look like industrial espionage at the highest level. This is where my character development starts, I guess. I didn't feel guilty about planting the evidence. I felt powerful. They tried to steal my life. I engineered their professional downfall, but the personal stuff was still a wreck. I was $8,900 in debt. Julian/Jeremy had cleaned out the joint savings account to the tune of $3,200 total BTW, and I was facing eviction if I couldn't pay the full rent. By Tuesday, I was back in the office, maintaining the facade of the distraught, blindsided victim. Mr. Marshall actually called me into his office, which has never happened before. "No, I am so deeply sorry for what you have endured," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "We now have evidence that Ms. Wilson was involved in a systematic long-term deception using firm resources and potentially compromising highly sensitive data, all while drawing you into her scheme." I gave him my best sad, betrayed puppy dog look. "I honestly had no idea, Mr. Marshall. I was completely fooled. I thought we were getting married. I am financially ruined by this. I didn't mention I knew Janice was his accomplice. I didn't mention the hard drive. I kept it focused on the financial damage Julian/Jeremy had inflicted on me." Mr. Marshall looked at his notes. "Yes, Mr. Hayes or Denton, we understand drained your joint accounts. Given the circumstances, and the fact that Ms. Wilson specifically mentioned your shared apartment in her texts, which we recovered from other channels NGL, we believe you were an unwitting victim." He cleared his throat. As a gesture of good faith, and to ensure you have the means to continue performing your excellent work during this stressful time, Marshall & Finch is issuing you a personal, interest-free loan of $10,000, payable over 3 years, which should immediately cover your credit card debt and stabilize your housing situation. And of course, we will change the locks on your apartment immediately. We will also arrange a consultation with our lease attorney gratis to ensure Julian/Jeremy has zero claim to the residence. I almost fainted. A $10,000 interest-free loan, my $8,900 debt was gone just like that. The petty revenge had yielded a massive, unexpected financial win. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, I managed, trying not to cry actual tears of relief this time. Just keep this confidential, Mr. Reed, he added, handing me the official loan document and a cashier's check. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than air, clutching the check. I immediately went to the break room to find Roy, $10,000, interest-free loan, they paid off my visa, I hissed, practically jumping up and down. Roy, who was meticulously arranging the coffee pods, didn't even look surprised. Good. That's what they deserve for hiring that snake and nearly compromising a billion-dollar merger. Did you get the lawyer? Yes, pro bono, excellent. Now for the truly petty part. Roy leaned in, we need to make sure they know exactly why they failed. Julian/Jeremy and Janice were officially ghosts. The police were looking for them in relation to some minor fraud charges which the firm downplayed because they didn't want the exposure of the data breach. But mainly they just disappeared into the city chaos. This is where the final, truly petty sting comes in. A few weeks after the whole debacle, I was settling into my newly secured sole lease apartment 3B, all mine finally. My credit score was recovering and I had managed to pay the full rent thanks to the loan. I was getting the feeling of normalcy back. I was sitting in my living room on a lazy Saturday afternoon, doom scrolling through social media, when I saw a strange profile request on Instagram. The name was Jerm Denton 39, Julian/Jeremy. I accepted it just to see what kind of terrible, desperate message he would send, nothing in the DMs, but he was tagged in a photo. The photo was a blurry, terribly lit selfie taken in front of a chain motel sign that said Econo Lodge. He was standing next to Janice. Janice was wearing the same aggressively bright suit jacket she always wore, but it looked rumpled and stained. They both looked miserable, slightly sunburned, and utterly defeated. The caption was short and pathetic, weathering the storm, starting fresh. I screenshotted it immediately, sending it to Roy with the caption, LMAO, but Roy wasn't done. Roy had done some intense digging using his incredible research skills and the few scraps of information we had Julian/Jeremy's real name and DOB. He had found the address of Julian/Jeremy's mother in rural Connecticut. They're running from the firm, but they're not running from the internet, Noah. Roy had told me excitedly earlier that week. We need to make sure they get the full picture of their defeat. Roy created a burner email account and wrote a long, detailed email. He attached the screenshot of the miserable Econo Lodge photo. The email was sent to Julian/Jeremy's mother, his brother, who was an accountant, LOL, and of course the personal email address Janice had registered with the firm years ago. Roy is truly a genius. The subject line was simply, your son-daughter is WNTD for fraud and almost compromising a billion-dollar merger. The body of the email was pure gold. Roy wrote it from the perspective of a concerned associate who had witnessed their scam. He detailed every single thing. The fake Julian Hayes identity, the $18.50 Venmo transactions, the total $3,200 they stole, the fact that Janice was using the firm's time and resources to coordinate the theft of my apartment, and the truly hilarious detail about the clip art business card. He concluded with the best part. And because Janice Wilson compromised highly sensitive merger data, the law firm granted the victim, Noah Reed, a $10,000 interest-free loan to fix the financial damage they caused. So not only did your son-daughter fail to steal the apartment, they caused their former employer to pay off the victim's credit card debt. He signed it, a very satisfied paralegal. I watched the email fly. That was it. Ultimate, petty, devastating revenge. They didn't just fail, they ended up inadvertently fixing my financial life, and everyone who mattered in their personal world, including the accountant brother who would definitely judge them, now knew they were miserable, failed scammers hiding in an Econo Lodge. I still had my down moments, TBH. Like I tried to watch a movie we used to watch together and I had to immediately turn it off and cry into a pillow. The betrayal was massive. I had spent years of my life and a significant chunk of my savings on a ghost, on a lie. But I had boundaries now. I changed my number, I changed my locks. I was back in therapy addressing why I allowed someone to treat me like a constant ATM for so long. It always comes back to the credit card debt anxiety, NGL. 3 months later, I'm typing this update from my apartment 3B, which is clean, quiet, and 100% mine. I still see Roy every day. He's my absolute hero, and we have the best black coffee gossiping sessions now. He's looking for a new job, but he's basically untouchable at Marshall & Finch now because he's the only one who didn't freak out during the blackout, and he's still helping them track down where Janice might have sent any actual confidential data. Janice and Jeremy Denton never came back. We heard through the law firm grapevine that Janice's accountant brother refused to take her calls, and her mother apparently sent a long, shaming email about the disgrace to the family. I saw the final update on the Julian Hayes profile, which was now locked down. The profile picture was gone, replaced by a generic stock image. He deleted the Econo Lodge photo. He was erased again, and that felt like the truest victory. I still have that $10,000 loan, but I've been aggressively paying it down. I am down to $6,500 left, which is a miracle, considering where I was just months ago. The financial stress is still real, but now it's manageable, not paralyzing. I realized something during all this chaos when I was sitting in the dark of that server room with Roy. The thing that hurt the most wasn't the money, although that sucked. It was the feeling of being completely, fundamentally wrong about the person closest to me. The thought that I had been so desperate to find a partner that I ignored every single red flag, from the vague job to the clip art business card. But I fought back. I stood up for myself even if it involved stealing a hard drive during a natural disaster and planting evidence. I did what I had to do to survive. Yesterday, I bought groceries at Trader Joe's. The bill came to $78.42. When I saw the notification hit my bank account, I didn't feel the chest tightness. I just felt annoyed at how expensive hummus is. It's a start. Anyway, that's the update. No more engagement ring discussions. Just me, my recovering credit score, and my apartment. Will update if I ever see Janice Wilson selling cheap business suits on the street corner. Wish me luck with the remaining $6,500. TBH, I'm gonna be okay.